America is home to 33 million small businesses, the beating heart of communities across the country.
And proof that the American dream is still alive.
This is a show about those dreamers and doers and the communities they serve.
Their real life stories.
Their struggles and successes.
Their grit, determination, and passion.
And the people who fight
to keep their American dream alive.
I'm Alfredo Ortiz.
I'm Elaine Parker.
And it's time for another episode of Main Street Matters,
America's small business megaphone. Hi, everybody, and welcome to Main Street Matters, America's small business megaphone. I'm Elaine Parker, the president of the Job Creators Network Foundation. And today we're joined by Julio Gonzalez. Julio's the CEO and founder of Engineered Tax Services Incorporated and recently wrote a very interesting op-ed talking about IRS reform titled, "This Agency Targets Individual Americans and Small Businesses. It Must Be Reformed." You can find that on foxnews.com. Julio, thanks so much for joining us today.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Well, tell me a little bit about your op-ed. You've argued that the IRS, quote, wields immense power with far too little accountability. What specific reforms do you think would most effectively rein in that power?
Yeah, I think, just historically, during the Biden administration, right, when they, were trying to bring on the 87,000 plus agents to weaponize, small businesses. And they said that they were going to go after the millionaires and billionaires. But, just like when Obama tried to do the same thing, they settle on the small business owners because they get the quick wins, right? These small business owners can't fight, like large business companies. So they're more of a target. And that weaponization was rampant during the Biden administration. And, if I see those kind of cases throughout the large business unit and the small business unit, then I would say, okay, well, at least there's some IRS equity here, equality in the sense that they're doing it to both. But that's not what I saw. I saw them picking on small business owners and taking black and white cases, tax credits, tax deductions, incentives, and basically, throwing them out and not only creating chaos for small business owners, but then that abuse then kind of rolls forward. And now they're afraid to ever take a tax deduction that they so richly deserve. And that's the problem, right? You have these tax benefits that Congress passes, the president signs off on, and you're afraid to take them because the IRS can get a little bit abusive and think that they can have quick wins over small businesses. And, they don't have the resources to fight these, Elaine, and so they don't. And I try to fight for them. I try to be their advocate. I try to be their voice up there in DC. And, try to work with the new IRS and try to bring some visibility to what happened in those previous years and see if we can't get some of that stuff cleaned up and maybe get some education out there that, the IRS is here to be a resource, but not to abuse small business owners. We got to get to that fairness. We got to get to that equality in our country because when you have the inability to fight for yourself because you don't have the money and the resources, and yet you're taking deductions away from small business owners that are fairly black and white, well, then, then we have a bad system. Now, I think we have the opportunity to do it, but, I wrote that article because how do you bring attention to it when there's, as you know, there are a million things going on every day up in DC and a lot of distractions and, a lot of priorities. But for us and for all you guys do, I think our priority is and focus is small businesses and the quality and justice they so richly deserve.
Yeah, you mentioned that they are not able, or they're nervous to take some of these legal deductions that they're able to take. Your company and the service you provide to these companies are to help them find out what deductions they're missing and help them save additional money so they can continue investing in their companies and their employees. Talk about what your company does.
Yeah, I mean, us at Engineered Tax Services, right? We're a resource to several thousand accounting firms, and we help them with tax credits and tax incentives and grants really for their clients, their small business owner clients, so that there's more equality in our country. We know that the Fortune 500 and the private equity firms can take advantage of all these credits and incentives, right? Because they have the resources. They work with the big four accounting firms and they have a tax team inside. But most accounting firms don't have the resources. I mean, some of these tax credits require engineers, some of them require scientists. And so you're never going to see accounting firms, small accounting firms, have those internal resources. They can't afford it. They can't manage it. They don't understand it. And so really we've become that resource to them to kind of create that access and ultimately, like I said, that tax equality so that all small business owners can enjoy the same tax code that is afforded to them, but getting access to that has been more challenging.
And you were talking about how small business owners are, they're really a target. I know that I see them as a target too, but it's almost like it's more that they don't have the resources to defend themselves in a long audit process. Because I always sort of look at it from the perspective that when the IRS comes knocking at your door, you versus in a court of law, you're innocent until you prove yourself. You're assumed innocent until you're found guilty, right? I think when the IRS comes knocking at your door, you're guilty until you prove yourself innocent, right? Because they think they have found something. They're going to put you through an audit process. There's going to be massive costs. You're probably going to have lawyers, probably going to have to hire accountants. And if you're a small Main Street business owner, those are massive costs. And so you're just sitting there thinking, how can I make this end? How can I settle this? How can I pay whatever fines and fees need to be paid to end this pain? And that's the disadvantage that small business owners have when the IRS is knocking on their door versus, like what you said, a big corporation can absorb these costs that an audit may bring upon them. And you said in your article that 90%, even though they always claim we're going to go after the millionaires and billionaires, 90% of the people in small businesses that are audited make under $400,000 a year. $400,000 a year small business owner, not a big business, is it?
No, it's a small business, but the backbone of our country, right? These are the people employing, individuals in small towns, communities, right? The backbone of our society. And it's really guilty until proven innocent, with the IRS, because Elaine, sometimes you don't know why they're auditing. They don't specifically say. They haven't come to you with the proof. And then all of a sudden they're making all these requests for documentation data that you have to hire an tax attorney to get involved. You have to hire your CPA to get involved. You don't really know what's going on. And so it's not transparent. It's not fair. It's not equitable. And it's abusive. And how can small businesses survive in that environment? They can't. And we've got to fix that. And I know you guys do a lot for small business owners. I think we all got to come together and elevate it. We've seen articles in Wall Street Journal, and we've seen, studies from Stanford University that talk about this abuse. And the IRS has admitted to this abuse, in these articles, right? But where's the change, right? So, we got to just keep pushing forward. That's why I wrote the article.
And you propose that Congress should set limits on small business audits. How could that be implemented without weakening the enforcement side against fraud? Because really, that's what they're there for, is to prevent fraud and abuse. And that does happen. I mean, not everybody pays their taxes on time and in the full amount. But how do we find that balance between not, having small businesses be in those crosshairs, but still enforcing on the fraud side? So what kind of limits would you be looking for?
No doubt. Listen, there is abuse, right? We saw that with the employment retention credits. We've seen it with all kinds of the PPL, right? So look, we know there's abuse, and maybe we could have set up things better to roll out those programs to eliminate the abuse. But okay, yeah, there is abuse, and the IRS is there to police that. But I think it shouldn't be guessing, right? It should be use AI, use some type of technology to come up with benchmarks that basically would set, variances that at a certain variance, you would want to pull that audit to check that. But again, being transparent and doing that and giving someone the opportunity to respond without having to bring in attorneys, accounting firms, and allow them to justify it, at least, kind of in like small claims court, something simple and simplifies the process. But no doubt there's abuse. I'm not saying there's not. And I'm saying that the IRS is good for that. And the IRS is good for interpreting things. But I think we got to eliminate guessing and use more intelligence to find these issues.
And we've known each other for a long time, Julio, and from the beginning of the Trump administration, I think is probably when we first met, when you were working with the administration on the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act and some of the provisions. And I remember talking to you about how excited you were about some of the provisions that you were working with them on, and you said to me, we shouldn't be waiting 30 years to reform our tax code. We should continuously be reforming it to simplify it. Wouldn't simplifying the tax code a continuous effort to simplify the tax code so that business owners, individuals understood how to do this and they didn't make mistakes? And wouldn't it reduce the audits just by the simplification and having all of us do it correctly? Wouldn't just simplification have a domino effect across the
So you
board?
think, yeah, so you think taking 2 million pages of tax code and tax law and condensing it into something more simple than so complex would be more fair? Yeah, I think that would be more fair. That would be more equitable. I think that makes logical sense. Not that logic always means that that's what's going to happen in Congress, right? Because you have so many constituents and probably big corporations fighting for complex tax strategies, and being able to influence those opportunities at the cost of complexion versus simplicity. So there's no doubt, like, we can make this tax code far more simpler. And I hope you guys continue to push for that and help small business owners get to something like, right, you said, if you're under 400,000, which is maybe a lot of the small businesses, maybe you go by a different tax code that has a little less complication.
Right,
Make it,
exactly.
like maybe start the process somewhere.
Do you see any bipartisan appetite for these types of reforms in the IRS, or are you finding that it's a deeply partisan issue?
Well, I don't see any bipartisan in what we're doing on the tax side. So, like almost none. And so, how unfortunate that there wouldn't be more, unity on helping small business owners, no matter what the party is. I think, I think we could all see that, unity would really help all the constituents, and that's their job, right, to serve us citizens and the small business owners. But I haven't seen it. Like, will it ever happen? I'm not sure, but it's. But look, I do believe that you have to work both sides of the aisle and educate and understand that that's an important process. And like, you don't have to have unity, right? Maybe you just need a few on one side. So but and I think there's good in both parties, right? So I think that continuing that education and not going up there and using money to influence, but using education as a way to help small business owners. I do think once in a while you can get through to a few people and have some, at least, if not unity, at least an ability to pass some favorable tax code for our small business owners.
Absolutely. And that influence it's very disproportionate when it comes to large companies. They've got lobbyists, they've got lawyers, floors of accountants who are constantly looking to help them comply with regulations and tax regulations, deal with audits, and then of course the influence they have on the Hill. Those are things that small businesses just can't compete with. It gives them such a competitive advantage. I mean, obviously, they have many competitive advantages over small businesses, but there are not there are not nearly as many large corporations in this country as small business owners. There's about 33 million small business owners in this country. They're employing about 60 million people. It's about half our workforce. And they're creating about 2/3 of all new net jobs. So when you look at that, you know, it amazes me that we can't get some bipartisanship on how to simplify the tax code for small businesses so that they're not such a target-rich um, target for the IRS and these audits that we see. If 90% of them are hitting our small business owners, there's a big problem here.
Yeah, well, you had a most amazing founder over there that, saw all these issues that you talked about and had so much concern because, we all started out as small business owners and eventually, we're able to grow and some become big companies. And, but, it's great to see, JCN be formed in a way that understands that, sometimes when you do have success, you got to use that success to come back and help the people that helped you along the way, and all the people that buy from you. I think that's such a great story. It's like when I talk to people that become wealthy, sometimes they forget to come back to their communities and invest in those communities. But what you guys have done to bring that awareness to all small business owners and amazing founder, I think it's incredible. And we just got to grow more alliances, right? And all come together and create the awareness. I think you guys do such a great job. And as more and more small businesses become aware of how you're helping them, and fighting for that cause, it just makes a lot of sense for so many people to join the cause and help, because it does take money, right? We all have to come together. We all have to contribute a little bit, right, to fight with those big companies with big wallets.
Absolutely. And Julio, having somebody like you as a partner for us has been so great over the last, like I said, about 10 years, because you're on the front lines. You're working with accounting firms who service small business owners. So you really have a front row seat and what the pain points are for small businesses. And I'm just curious, what is the most common like tax or compliance pain point that you're seeing with small businesses that discourage growth?
I think what I'm seeing is fair. I mean, I'm on stage every week, maybe 2-3 times a week, and small business owners, one, don't have the ability to understand this tax code, and it is complex. So that's one gate, one hurdle, and then the other hurdle is they're so afraid, right? They are so scared to death of the IRS, and so we got to get over both those hurdles. And but I see it all over the country. I see it every week, and it's unfortunate because the big corporations, they pay a lot of taxes, right? And so do the billionaires, right? But maybe they're paying 11% of net income in taxes, right? And the small business owner, maybe contributes less in tax revenue, but they're paying 40 to 50% of their net income in revenue. What a large discrepancy. And that discrepancy is because of the complexities and the fear.
Absolutely. Well, I would be remiss to not spend a few minutes talking about the big, beautiful bill with you because, like I mentioned a few minutes ago, you were very instrumental in helping with some of the policies that were included in the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. And I remember that's when I actually met you, was during that whole fight. Tell us what some of the positive elements of the big, beautiful bill that have come out of it since it was signed this past summer on July 4th.
Yeah, some of the amazing things about this bill is, one, it makes a lot of things permanent. So how great for once in our lifetimes as a business owner to wake up on New Year's Day and know that the same tax code you enjoyed one year is the same tax code you get to follow the next year, because that's not been the case for the last 30, 40 years. every year it's a different tax code. There's changing in depreciation methods and interest methods and all these calculations. You never know what tax code you have. And then a small business owner always waits to the end of the year because they hear that there's going to be changes in the tax code. There could be a benefit or maybe not. But the big thing here is that it's permanent. A lot of the things are permanent in it. That's fantastic. And then, like having bonus depreciation restored so that when you buy something as a company, you get to expense it. Like in our tax code for small business owners, they were buying equipment, but then had to write it off over 4 years, 5 years, 7 years, 10 years. Well, you already spent the cash. Why can't you have that equivalent expense? And now that we have bonus depreciation, and now at least you're taking the expense in real time. And that's great. And knowing that that's permanent, it restored a lot of the benefits of the research and development tax credit, which is really a credit for small business owners on innovation. Every time they're trying to make their product better, faster, cheaper, all these things, right? That they're getting basically a refund of labor. So they enhanced that credit. I mean, for small business owners, they also lowered the effective net income tax rate through some corporation structures. So, I mean, the list goes on. Those are like my top three. But ultimately, this bill is so favorable. But I like that it's permanent and that we don't have to, again, think about what's the tax code going to be the next year or the next year after. And now that it's permanent, it's going to be more difficult for any party in control to change.
So it's permanent, the 20% pass-through tax deduction specifically for pass-through entities, i.e. small businesses, and the immediate expensing, bonus depreciation, research and development, all of that is permanent. Not new, but permanent. So why do the Democrats keep saying that the big, beautiful bill are tax cuts for millionaires and billionaires, when essentially the only new tax cuts in there were no tax on tips and no tax on overtime? So I don't know any millionaires and billionaires. I've never read about a millionaire or a billionaire who makes overtime or tips being millionaires and billionaires, which means what we did was we created consistency for businesses, for small businesses, and we gave new tax cuts to middle-class workers.
Yeah, and Social Security, right? So this bill was all about the individuals and small business owners, right? This was 100% for them. Now, the Democrats talk about it being tax incentives for the billionaires. Well, I mean, that's just flat out not truthful, right? And, maybe we need to fact check them, chat GPT them and say, okay, you said this, but, AI is saying that's not true, right? I'd love to have an AI screen when they're talking right next to them and showing that it's not truthful. I mean, but yeah,
come
I guess,
on. They never let facts get in the way of their narrative. They would never let that happen.
Right. But I would love to see it. I'd love to have us fact check them more and write articles about that because, and get that information out because it's just simply not true. But I guess it, for them, thinks that they sell votes that way. And again, in the previous administration, it was IRS abuse to small business owners. We lost the bonus depreciation, right? They basically took away the impact of R&D tax credits. You're right. We taxed tips, we taxed all those things, overtime, things of that nature. We had much more regulation. Thank God they're eliminating all this regulation as well. And much easier, but we could do even more to help these small business owners. I think that's what you guys are helping with out there.
Absolutely, with partners like you. How do you think we can restore faith in the tax system while still ensuring that everybody does pay their fair share?
Yeah, I think we've got to, eliminate the abuse from the IRS first and foremost, right? And then, I think that would be a big win for the administration. And then from that, build on what we have done, but educate. We need to educate people and say, okay, the tax code, there are so many benefits today. I think how are we passed this tax code in May, and the accounting firms, their accounting firms, you just wrapped up 1015 tax returns, and so now their accounting firms have to learn a whole new tax code, but you in essence have 70 days to plan right for the end of the year to optimize your taxes. So that's always difficult, right? So how do we get them up to speed, and then going forward, how do we make sure that the small business owners can take advantage of this? I always tell small business owners that you got to be proactive, not only, with supporting causes like JCN and having a voice up there in DC, because I always tell small businesses, if you're not at the table, you're on the table. And that's definitely the case in DC. And then we have to be proactive as small business owners and talk to JCN and talk to different organizations, say, what can I take advantage of in the small business, this bill? And then how do I make sure I'm talking to my accounting firm and educating them, being proactive, right? Like it's being like proactive with your health versus reactive, right? We can't be reactive as small business owners. Like part of it's our fault if we don't take advantage of finding out more about how we can benefit from the bill, bringing that to our accounting firm and doing it before December 31st, because January 1st, you lose a lot of the tax benefits that you can take for that year.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Julio, tell everyone where they can learn more about you and what you're working on and read some of your opinion pieces, and also where they can learn more about engineered tax services.
Yeah. So listen, find me at Tax Reform Expert on Instagram, all social media. I'm constantly putting up tax tips on what things you can do to better optimize your taxes for small business owners and take advantage of grants. And again, engineeredtaxservices.com. We put a lot of tax tips there as well. Again, we're working with several thousand accounting firms to bring all these advantages of the big, beautiful bill to all of you. And, it's people like JCN that help us get that message out to the accounting firms and the small business owners. So we appreciate the platform to share that with everyone.
Yeah, it's really important information that people should know and they should understand. And you can also read his new op-ed at foxnews.com. It's called "This Agency Targets Individual Americans and Small Businesses. It must be reformed." I totally agree with you. Well, Julio, thank you so much for taking the time to join us on Main Street Matters, America's small business megaphone. And thank you all for taking the time to tune in. Main Street Matters is part of the Salem Podcast Network. New episodes debut every Wednesday and Friday. You can subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcast from, and we'll be back soon with another episode. Bye for now.